Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into the centuries-old mystery of how women's anxiety has been misunderstood, mislabeled, and treated in some truly bizarre ways. You're lying in bed, right? Maybe the lights are dimmed, but imagine this instead. You're in ancient Greece, barefoot on a dusty floor, sweating in a linen dress that clings to your back, and the village healer just told you your womb has wandered up toward your lungs. You cough. They nod. It's definitely the womb. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the sunlit corridors of ancient Athens, heart racing not because you've just finished arguing with your philosopher husband, but because you've been feeling breathless, dizzy, and vaguely like you're floating outside your body. Panic. Yes. But the men around you don't have that word yet. What you're experiencing is hysteria, not metaphorically, literally. They think your womb has decided it's had enough of your uterus duties and is now drifting around your body like a hormonal ghost. This concept, hysteria, from the Greek hysteria, meaning womb, becomes the go-to diagnosis for all things feminine and irrational. You feel sad? Wandering womb. You scream in public. Wandering womb. You don't feel like getting married to that goat farming merchant. Definitely womb-related rebellion. The treatment? Oh, you'll love this. One of the more popular methods is fumigation, vaginal fumigation specifically. A concoction of strong-smelling herbs is burned beneath you, in the hope the womb will be smoked back into its proper place. There's even the opposite version. Sweet smells near the nose to lure it upward, and foul odors near the lower half to shoo it back down. It's like a ghost hunting mission. But your uterus is the ghost, and garlic is the trap. Historians still argue whether these fumigation rituals were genuinely believed to work, or were more symbolic gestures, performances designed to calm both the woman and the community that surrounded her. And here's the kicker. This theory doesn't die off quickly. It survives for centuries. Womb as troublemaker becomes one of the longest-running medical scapegoats in history. You get anxious in public. Clearly your reproductive organs are jealous of your voice. In between herbal smoke sessions, some physicians recommend marriage as a cure, because of course the uterus apparently calms down once it has babies to babysit. No babies. Then your anxiety must be the result of withering femininity. You are, in their view, a neglected temple, and your internal organs are staging a protest march. Meanwhile, fringe healers offer other ideas. One obscure papyrus suggests keeping a live weasel under the bed to ward off womb movement. You're not sure how it's supposed to help, but you are sure you now have a weasel in your bed, and that's not lowering your anxiety. Still, in the world of ancient medicine, this is cutting edge. You're considered both sacred and volatile, a vessel of life that occasionally explodes into chaos. If you're wealthy, you might see Hippocrates himself, who recommends a blend of diet, baths, and gentle persuasion, code for sex or marriage, to calm you down. If you're not wealthy, a midwife may rub ointments on your belly while muttering spells. Your emotions? Irrelevant. Your thoughts? Unreliable. Your role? To be soothed, silenced, and settled, preferably into domestic service or motherhood. And if that fails, there's always more smoke. Ironically, men in the same society are also anxious. They just get cooler diagnoses like melancholia or black bile imbalance. You're not melancholic. You're just hormonal. Congratulations. Still, every once in a while, there's a crack in the logic. A fringe thinker might suggest that anxiety is linked to a woman's environment, too much stress, maybe, or not enough autonomy. But these ideas are like whispers in a stadium full of shouting philosophers. They are noted, then promptly ignored. And all the while, your womb continues its invisible travels, at least in their minds. You go through waves of breathlessness, your hands tremble, and your thoughts race faster than the chariots outside. But no one asks why you feel this way. They only ask where your womb has gone this time. You lie down on a cot, belly bare, as herbs crackle beneath you. The scent is overwhelming cloves, frankincense, a sharp tang of vinegar. Your legs twitch, your eyes flutter, and somewhere in your chest, you feel tightness. You close your eyes. You try not to think about the weasel. A young assistant fans the smoke toward you, careful not to meet your eyes. To him, you're not a person with panic. You're a vessel with a broken part. And as the smoke curls higher, you wonder not for the last time if the real problem is your womb or the world around it. You open your eyes again, but this time it's darker, colder, and everything smells vaguely like damp stone and beeswax. You're in medieval Europe now, probably France, maybe England, and your anxiety hasn't improved. In fact, it's just taken on a whole new set of supernatural consequences. You're trembling before a priest, kneeling on a hard wooden floor trying to explain the nightmares, the shaking hands, the dread that wraps around your spine like a cold serpent. His face remains still, carved from patience and paranoia. He nods solemnly and tells you what you feared. This is no natural affliction. The devil has touched you. Because obviously it's not anxiety, it's not trauma from childbirth or pressure from an arranged marriage or the endless grind of village life. It's a demon, a literal one, possibly more than one, fighting over your soul like it's the last loaf of holy bread at Mass. This is what people believe, almost universally, that women are spiritually vulnerable. The devil, like a moth to a flickering candle, is drawn to your perceived weakness, your emotional storms, possession, your sobbing fits, evidence, your panic attacks in the middle of the night, the work of a succubus whispering blasphemies in your ear. Your treatment begins with confession, but not the quiet, graceful kind. No, this one's more of a community event. You're paraded into the church, your neighbors peeking over shoulders, all of them wondering whether you'll float or sink when the river trial comes. Spoiler, either outcome is bad for you. Historians still argue whether most of these public exorcisms were about genuine belief or simply public control, a way to keep women in line through fear and spectacle. Either way, you don't get to have an opinion. Now you're on your knees while a priest chants Latin, sprinkles holy water, and rubs oil on your forehead. You flinch. He flinches. Everyone flinches because your twitchy behavior could be interpreted as demonic resistance or worse, confirmation. Your family looks on nervously, not sure if they're supporting your healing or just witnessing your slow spiral into social death. One more outburst, one more moment of panic, and someone's going to start talking about trials. And trials don't end well. For the fringe thinkers of the day, herbal remedies are still used. A poultice of valerian root, lavender and rosemary might be tied around your neck like a charm. It doesn't stop the shaking, but At least it smells nice. Some midwives whisper that your anxiety is from melancholy vapors rising from the stomach. Others recommend leeches to let out the bad blood. You wonder who's more terrifying, the priest, the healer, or the leech. Meanwhile, your symptoms are treated like riddles. Are your hands shaking because of demonic influence, or because you haven't eaten in 2 days? Do you scream in the night because of possession, or because of the trauma no one dares talk about? That thing that happened, that secret. At night, your dreams are vivid torches, fire, shadows pressing against stone walls. When you speak of them, people nod knowingly. Clearly visions from hell. You stop talking about them. The church has become your therapist now, but its method is more dramatic than effective. The sacred rituals are supposed to expel whatever darkness haunts you, but in reality they just make your world smaller, tighter, more terrifying. You're handed a string of prayers to recite. You do. You're told to fast. You do. You're told to sleep on straw with no pillow, to humble your body. You do. And still your chest tightens every time the sun sets. Still you feel a gnawing pressure behind your eyes that no prayer can erase. Once, during an especially bad episode, you collapse in the town square. People gather. You can hear the murmurs. She's cursed. The devil's taken her. A witch, maybe? And just like that, you're marked. There's an open fire in the distance. You try not to look at it too long. Now let's be honest, some women are lucky. A kind nun might take you in, offer herbal teas, quiet walks through convent gardens. She tells you that God's love is stronger than any demon. For a while you feel better, not because of the prayers, but because finally someone is being gentle. Still, it's a delicate balance. Say the wrong thing, twitch the wrong way, and suddenly your savior could become your judge. Here's a fun little fringe fact. In some isolated regions, people believe that anxiety is caused by elf-shot, tiny, invisible arrows fired by fairies into your body. You might be prescribed wearing a protective stone, or leaving out milk for the fair folk to calm their mischief. You don't necessarily believe it, but honestly, it makes more sense than the devil whispering through your molars. And so, night after night, you lie on your straw pallet, heartbeat thudding like a drum in your ears. You whisper the prayers, you avoid eye contact. You don't scream anymore, but the fear remains. Not just of your own mind, but of what everyone else might do about it. Now your breath smells like iron, not metaphorically, literally. You're in Renaissance Europe now, Florence, maybe Paris, and your mouth tastes like a coin purse because someone just bled you. Again. See, you've been having dizzy spells, headaches, a constant thrum of unease, and the occasional moment where you forget where you are or why you're crying. To you, it feels like the world is pressing down too hard, but to your doctor, it's clearly your humours. Ah yes, the 4 humour theory, still going strong. Your anxiety isn't emotional or mental or spiritual, it's medical, but only in the most medieval way. Your blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile are out of whack. And the answer? Remove some of them, specifically blood, the red stuff. Out it goes. You lie on a high-back chair, pale and sweaty in a velvet gown that weighs more than your sense of well-being. A man with suspiciously few teeth carefully slices a vein near your elbow. A warm trickle follows. You feel light-headed. He nods, satisfied. The spirits are cooling, he mutters. Historians still argue whether this bloodletting ever did anything beyond causing anemia and a greater need for a fainting couch. But that didn't stop it from becoming the anxiety cure-all for the Renaissance elite, especially for women. If you're wealthy, they at least use a silver lancet. If you're not, it might be a sharpened nail. And if you're really unlucky, they'll bring out the leeches. Yes, plural. They don't just want your bad feelings gone, they want them slurped up by a hungry little worm named Morris, who now lives in a glass jar on the apothecary's shelf. But it's not just blood. There's also purging, feeling overwhelmed. Have this syrup of ipecac and enjoy the violent evacuation of your entire digestive system. You'll be too exhausted to be anxious success, right? You're told the pressure behind your eyes is from a rising of vapors. So they give you something to sneeze those vapors out. A snuff box filled with spicy powder is held under your nose. You inhale, sneeze violently, and for one glorious second, forget to be anxious. Progress. You're handed a detailed dietary chart next. No garlic, no pepper, and definitely no wine, except when it's prescribed in measured sips for nerve soothing. Your doctor hands you a goblet and suggests you pray more. You drink. You don't pray. There's also this idea floating around, literally floating, that anxiety in women comes from excess heat in the blood. And heat rises, right? So obviously your brain is overheating. That explains the panic. Naturally, the solution is to cool you down. Sometimes with cold compresses, sometimes with ice baths, sometimes weirdly by making you walk barefoot across cold stones at dawn. You're not sure what's being treated, your anxiety or your dignity. And then comes the mercury. Tiny doses, of course. Just enough to balance you. It doesn't work, but it makes your teeth feel loose and your tongue taste like metal, which distracts from your existential dread. Win-win. In fringe circles, you might meet a physician who believes your anxiety is a symptom of celestial imbalance. The moon is in Virgo or Saturn has dipped too close to your personal aura. A star chart is drawn up and you're advised to carry a pouch of rose quartz and chant before bed. You do it. Not because you believe it'll work, but because it's the first treatment that doesn't involve puncturing a vein. Meanwhile, society's expectations press even harder. You're expected to host, to bear children, to embroider something pleasant while ignoring the chasm of panic forming behind your eyes. You smile politely through it all, like someone trapped in an oil painting that's been mislabeled content woman with loot. And yet despite the bloodletting, the enemas, the vomiting, the astrology known of it, quite solves what you feel. You wake up tired. You go to bed exhausted. You flinch at loud sounds and whisper too often to the maid about your heaviness of mind. You're not alone. Women all across Europe are quietly falling apart, but doing it politely. Some write about it in coded letters. Others, if they're lucky, paint or compose music as a quiet rebellion. You dream about running away, joining a convent where no one expects anything but silence. That sounds perfect. But instead, you go for your next appointment. This time the physician recommends a balance walk. You're to walk exactly 243 steps every morning, with your hands behind your back, breathing through one nostril. It's absurd, but halfway through, you realize something. For the first time in days, no one is talking at you. And the breeze on your face, it's actually kind of nice. Small moments of peace appear between the horror show of treatments, a cup of honeyed chamomile by candlelight, a kind word from a maid who's seen you at your worst, a sunset that isn't accompanied by dread. You hold on to those moments like lifelines, and yet The treatments continue. More blood, more sneezing powder, more herbs steeped in wine, tied in bundles, stuffed into pouches, boiled into tonics, or burned in fire bowls. No one asks how you feel. They ask how much you weigh, what color your urine is, and whether you've been laughing too loudly lately, because that, apparently, is a sign of heat imbalance in the lungs. Who knew? You lay back in the chair, arm outstretched, as another glass bottle fills with your blood. The room spins. The physician hums. You close your eyes and imagine floating above it all, detached, quiet, and finally mercifully still. The room smells like beeswax, velvet, and old ink. You blink, slowly, and realize you're no longer in a grimy sick room or a church nave. You're in an 18th century drawing room, maybe London, maybe Vienna, and it's oddly elegant. You're wearing a corset so tight it might actually be squeezing the anxiety out of you, or into your liver. Hard to tell. But you're not here for fashion. You're here for a new diagnosis own. You'll hear whispered by candlelight and shouted across salons. Hysteria. Oh yes, hysteria. A condition so vague, so gendered and so unprovable it becomes the Swiss Army knife of women's suffering. Can't sleep? Hysteria. Crying too much? Hysteria. Mood swings, irritability, forgetfulness, headaches, or the unbearable urge to scream into a lace handkerchief. Definitely hysteria. You sit quietly while the physician, a man who's never menstruated but writes books about your uterus, scribbles furiously. He believes your womb has wandered, literally. According to popular theory, your uterus is a wild, semi-sentient organ, drifting around your body like a moody balloon, colliding with other organs and causing emotional chaos. Today it's pressing on your lungs. Tomorrow it might head to your brain. Medical GPS has not yet been invented. Historians still argue whether this was taken seriously by doctors or simply used as an umbrella excuse for female distress. Either way, it's now the dominant narrative. So, how do they treat a wandering womb? With fumigation? Yes. Medicinal herbs are burned, sometimes near your head, sometimes lower, and the smoke is meant to lure the uterus back to its proper position. It's like trying to catch a feral cat with a scented candle. And of course, bloodletting is still popular. That never went out of style. You're bled just enough to weaken your body, calm your nerves, and eliminate your pesky will to protest. Your skirts are heavy with lace, and your arms are light with blood loss. There's a growing list of treatments now. Mustard plasters, camphor rubs, cold baths, hot baths, vapor baths, and most alarmingly, electrotherapy. A fringe French doctor claims small shocks to the back can cure hysteria. You try not to scream when it happens. But for the truly wealthy, and let's be honest, the very bored, there's another option. The hysterical paroxysm. Yes, you heard that right. A growing number of physicians have discovered that pelvic massage often calms women down. Greatly. Repeatedly. To the point where new devices are invented to automate the process. Thus, the early vibrator is born not in a neon-lit boutique, but in a proper candle-lit doctor's office, prescribed like aspirin for your soul. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. You do both. They call it a symptom. Meanwhile, society leans harder into this diagnosis. You're expected to be delicate, nervous, fragile. It's fashionable, even romantic, to be faint. Women carry smelling salts in tiny silver cases. You fan yourself theatrically. Every opera seems to feature a woman who dies from melancholy. It's tragic, it's beautiful, it's unbearable. You walk a tightrope, show too much emotion, and you're labeled hysterical. Show too little, and you're cold, frigid, unfit for marriage. Your options are narrow, and none of them include being taken seriously. Fringe thinkers, however, begin to push back. Some suggest that hysteria is linked to trauma. A few daring writers hint that maybe, just maybe, it's the stifling rules of society itself causing this distress. Imagine that. A French philosopher even suggests that anxiety in women may be a rational response to irrational constraints. He's promptly ignored by every dinner party host west of the Rhine. In the parlors of rising psychoanalysts, theories brew like oversteeped tea. One doctor starts to keep notes on talking cures, where women are simply allowed to speak freely. No bleeding, no burning herbs, just talking. It's revolutionary, radical, almost suspiciously kind. You try it once. You sit on a couch, sip a weak chamomile tea, and describe the feeling in your chest like a door that won't open.
The young doctor nods. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't write much. For the first time in years, someone listens. It's not a cure, but it doesn't hurt. The results vary. Sometimes you walk out feeling lighter. Sometimes you feel exposed. But for once, your anxiety is being treated like something with roots, not just symptoms. You keep this quiet. It's not proper to talk too much. A lady must remain composed. So you retreat to your chamber, where your diary becomes your therapist. Your quill scratches out secret truths under candlelight, truths that would be laughed at in the daylight. The pressure continues. You must be charming, but not too loud. Smart, but not too clever. Soft, but not too weak. Every day feels like a performance, and your anxiety is the stagehand pulling the curtain just a bit too early. But here's the quiet miracle. Small moments of rebellion. You read Mary Wollstonecraft. You sneak into lectures. You ask questions instead of offering smiles. And little by little something shifts. You're still labeled hysterical. But now, there's a flicker of doubt in their eyes when they say it. Maybe you're not mad. Maybe you're just human. You wake up with a tightness in your chest, but this time, it's the 19th century Victorian England to be exact. The wallpaper is floral, the corset tighter than ever, and the air smells like coal smoke and rosewater. You are a woman of means, or at least pretending to be. And your anxiety? Oh, darling, it's a character trait now. Here, anxiety is romanticized. The nervous woman is elegant, sensitive, artistic. She doesn't yell, she swoons. She doesn't worry, she languishes. Her hands tremble just slightly, like a dying leaf on bone china. It's all very poetic until you're the one doing the trembling, and it never seems to stop. You clutch your journal, the one with the gilt-edged pages and a pressed violet inside, and whisper your fears into it at midnight. The doctors still call it hysteria, but they've added new vocabulary. Nerves, female weakness, melancholia. Different names, same confusion. There's a fashionable new prescription now, rest. But not just any rest, the rest cure. You're sent to bed for 6 to 8 weeks. No reading, no writing, no visitors, and absolutely no talking about your feelings. You're to lie in stillness, fed by hand, sometimes even bathed like an infant. You're not allowed to move more than a few steps a day. Historians still argue whether this was well-meaning or cruel. Either way, it made one thing clear: your body is no longer your own. Your distress isn't treated as personal. It's something to be managed by others, like a bad hairstyle or an embarrassing cousin. And who do we thank for this delightful cure? Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell, an American physician famous for enforcing silence, solitude, and enforced helplessness. He writes extensively about women's mental health, though again he's never had to be on the receiving end of his own treatment. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, an actual sufferer of the rest cure, later writes The Yellow Wallpaper, a haunting story of a woman driven mad by her own confinement. It becomes a quiet rebellion, one of many flickers of protest in a world determined to quiet women's pain. You lie in bed and count ceiling cracks one by one. You try to keep track of time by the way the light moves across the floorboards. Occasionally, a maid brings weak broth and avoids your eyes. The silence hums so loudly it might eat you whole. But if you're not rich, you don't get bed rest. You get pills, tinctures of opium, laudanum, chloral hydrate. Victorian medicine's sleepy little secret. 1 drop calms the nerves. 2 drops make you forget your name. It's prescribed like peppermint. And it's not just medical. Society itself trains you to internalize your distress. Girls are taught to suppress their feelings, to stay cheerful, to avoid burdening others with emotion. You're praised for being composed, even when you're crumbling. There's even a device for mental overstimulation, the cranial cap. A strange mesh contraption placed over your head, sometimes with a mild current running through it. You sit quietly, eyes closed, looking like a fashionable time traveler, while the doctor swears this will reorganize your nerves. There's a fringe belief popular in spiritualist circles that your anxiety may be caused by unchanneled psychic energy. A séance is recommended. You hold hands with strangers around a table, eyes shut, waiting for the table to knock or spin or whisper. It doesn't. But for the first time in weeks, someone asked how you feel. You meet women like you, quiet, fidgety, terrified of loud noises and social engagements. You pass each other in shop aisles and see the same tired, haunted look. You nod, silently. A secret club with no name. And still, the expectations pile up. You must run a household. You must entertain. You must birth and raise children while keeping your waist tiny and your smile gentler than lace. Your pain doesn't fit this world, so it hides. You try water cures, public bathhouses with bubbling pools of different temperatures. 1 hot, 1 cold, 1 with herbs, 1 with something fizzing ominously. You submerge slowly and pretend your anxiety is dissolving into the steam. You try tonics with names like Dr. Worthington's Female Relief and Madame Lavelle's Soothing Drops. They taste like licorice and regret. You try to pray it away. You kneel at a pew and whisper secrets to God that you can't even say aloud to yourself. You promise to be better, to worry less, to stop crying into your pillow every night when the gaslight hisses out. But your heart still races when the door knocks. Your hands still shake when you write. And sometimes, just sometimes, you fantasize about running away to a cottage by the sea, to a place where no one knows your name or expects you to wear gloves in the summer. You're not mad, but no one seems to believe you. And so you lie down once again, corset unstrung, listening to the ticking of the mantel clock like it might tell you something. You wait for the dread to pass. It doesn't. But you keep waiting. It's the dawn of the 20th century now. You're stepping into a world where the lights are brighter, the streets are louder, and something new is stirring in the air, a whisper of science, progress, and rebellion. But your anxiety? Oh, it hasn't gone anywhere. It just wears a new hat. Nervous breakdown. You might be sitting in a psychiatrist's office, or maybe a sanatorium surrounded by pine trees and fresh air. The place smells like eucalyptus and disinfectant, a strange combination meant to cleanse your body and your mind. You clutch a tissue, hands trembling, but this time the doctors are speaking a language you almost understand. Freud is all the rage. Sigmund Freud, the Austrian neurologist who insists that your anxiety might not come from a wandering womb or spoiled nerves, but from your unconscious mind, bubbling with repressed desires, fears, and conflicts. Suddenly, your dreams and daydreams matter. The way your mind wanders during tea time might reveal the secrets of your soul. Historians still argue whether Freud's theories truly helped women or simply complicated their suffering with a psychoanalytic puzzle. But you don't care. You're fascinated. You try free association, the doctor encouraging you to say whatever comes to mind, no matter how embarrassing or odd. It's like opening a rusty trunk in your attic and finding decades of dusty memories tangled inside. You speak about your mother, your father, your childhood. You talk about the fear of not being enough, the terror of being too much. The famous talking cure has begun to replace brutal treatments like bloodletting and rest cures, though many doctors still cling to those old methods, like an overstuffed teddy bear refusing to leave your bed. You're offered new medications too, but they're nothing like today's antidepressants. There's bromides, which slow your nervous system into sluggish submission, and barbiturates, which knock you out like a mallet to the brain. You pop pills and try to hold on to your sanity as the world rushes past. But the real shift is social. Women like you begin to demand more. The suffragettes march, their banners bright in the sunlight, shouting for the right to vote. You hear stories of women breaking free from homes, jobs, and marriages to chase their own dreams, dangerous, scandalous, but thrilling. Your anxiety sometimes feels like a spark and urge to rebel against the strict codes of femininity that have boxed you in for centuries. You aren't just nervous, you're alive, you're angry, you're tired. Yet, society still pathologizes you. You're labeled hysterical or neurotic for daring to step outside the lines. Your anxiety is a symptom of your fragile female constitution, or worse, a moral failing. The irony stings. Meanwhile, electric shock therapy is invented. It's brutal and bewildering. You are strapped to a chair, electrodes clamped to your temples, jolted into convulsions that leave you breathless. It's called a treatment for mental illness, but historians still debate whether it helped or harmed women in the long run. In some circles, the idea of nervous hygiene takes root. Women are urged to avoid overwork, overexcitement, and too much thinking because too much thinking is clearly a feminine flaw. You attend lectures on nervous diseases and read pamphlets advising you to drink tonic waters, avoid caffeine, and spend time outdoors. The doctor says fresh air and sunlight might be the best cure of all. You sigh and try to enjoy a walk, but your thoughts keep spinning like a broken record. There are also eccentric treatments. Some women try hypnotism, hoping to erase their fears with the flick of a pendulum. Others turn to spiritualism, clutching seances and Ouija boards like lifelines in the dark. It's not science, but it's something. You might even hear about the restless uterus theory's distant cousin, the idea that anxiety could be hereditary, passed down through generations like a family heirloom no one wanted. In this shifting landscape, you glimpse progress, but it's a slow march. You're caught between centuries, the old world of superstition and control, and the new world of exploration and voice. And through it all, your anxiety pulses quietly beneath the surface, a reminder that no matter the century, your story is part of a much larger history, a history still unfolding. Now you find yourself in the roaring 1920s, a decade that's all jazz, flappers, and rebellion. But your anxiety is still crashing the party, uninvited and unrelenting. The world has changed dramatically. Women got the vote, the first cars are zipping down the streets, and speakeasies hum with the promise of freedom and forbidden drinks. But inside, your heart pounds like a drum in a silent room. This era still sees anxiety through a medical lens, but the language has shifted. It's no longer just hysteria or nerves, but something a bit more clinical, neurasthenia. You're told you have nervous exhaustion, as if your body is a machine running on fumes. The doctor might prescribe a cure that sounds suspiciously like a spa day massage, electricity, and baths with vibrating water jets. Sounds fun until you realize the spas are just expensive clubs for the rich, and the vibrating baths sometimes cause more shaking than soothing. You might be recommended a nerve tonic filled with ingredients you can't pronounce and a hint of alcohol or opium to dull the edges. It's a bit like being given a candy bar to fix a broken engine sweet, distracting, but not quite right. Historians still debate whether neurasthenia was a genuine medical condition or a cultural label used to pathologize women who dared to step outside traditional roles? Was it a real illness, or a socially acceptable way to say, "You're overwhelmed by life, dear, try harder"? You find yourself caught between two worlds, the glamorous jazz clubs and the clinical examination room. The tension between social freedom and medical control is palpable. Quirkier still, some doctors experiment with psychogalvanic therapy, hooking you up to mild electrical currents to supposedly recalibrate your nerves. It sounds like a mad scientist's garage project, but for many women, it's the latest hope.
Amid all this, some women quietly resist. They refuse the pills, reject the stereotypes, and seek meaning beyond their prescribed roles. They write poetry, join early feminist groups, or simply hold hands in solidarity, sharing their struggles in hushed tones. Your anxiety hasn't disappeared. It's just learned to wear a smile and fit into the perfect mold even if it's cracking underneath. You're now stepping into the 1960s and 70s, a time of explosion, social, political, and personal. The air is thick with the scent of rebellion, patchouli, and cigarette smoke. Women's anxiety, long hidden behind curtains and polite smiles, starts to roar, demanding recognition and change. It's no longer just a medical or psychological issue. It's a political one. Feminism is blooming, and with it, a fresh narrative about women's mental health. You hear slogans like, "The personal is political," and suddenly your anxiety isn't just a quirk or a disease, it's a symptom of a society that confines and confines and confines again. Historians still debate how much feminism reshaped the understanding of anxiety, but one thing is clear. Women are speaking up. Therapeutically, the era is a cocktail of old and new. Talk therapy flourishes, becoming more accessible and popular. You sit in chairs in softly lit rooms, unpacking decades of conditioning, trauma, and frustration. Psychiatrists begin to distinguish anxiety disorders from other mental illnesses, using new diagnostic manuals. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical industry introduces benzodiazepines drugs that promise rapid relief, but also raise fears of addiction and side effects. You might be handed a prescription and warned to take it easy, but the line between help and harm blurs. Outside the clinic, self-help books flood the shelves. Titles like "Women Who Run with the Wolves" or "The Feminine Mystique" whisper that your anxiety might be rooted in your unrealized potential and societal oppression. You read them in cafes filled with smoke and whispered conversations, nodding along as if someone finally gets it. You might join support groups, attend consciousness-raising meetings where women share stories of pain and hope, creating a sisterhood around anxiety and healing. But not everyone agrees. Some argue that medicalizing women's anxiety pathologizes legitimate responses to oppression. Others believe pharmaceuticals are a necessary tool. Historians continue to debate how much these debates advanced women's mental health. In a quirky twist, aromatherapy and crystals regain popularity. You try lavender oils, hoping the scent will chase away the restless thoughts. Maybe you carry a little amethyst in your pocket, a soft talisman against the storm. The decade also brings pop psychology into the spotlight. TV shows and movies depict women struggling with nerves and emotions, sometimes sensationalized, sometimes sympathetic. You might recognize your own anxieties mirrored in these stories, a strange comfort in the spotlight. And yet, stigma persists. You still find yourself whispering about anxiety, fearful of being labeled weak or unstable. The world expects you to balance protest signs and dinner plates with equal grace. So, you take a deep breath, light a joint or a cigarette, and push forward. Your anxiety isn't just your burden, it's part of a growing chorus demanding to be heard and understood. As you step into the 1980s and early 1990s, the world feels both vast and surprisingly close-knit at the same time. Thanks to the explosion of cable television, VHS tapes, and a rapidly expanding media landscape, you find yourself with unprecedented access to information about anxiety and mental health, all from the comfort of your living room. Imagine curling up on a shag carpet, maybe wearing your favorite oversized sweater, clutching a warm mug of chamomile tea as you watch a therapy session on a late-night public access channel, or a self-help seminar promising to fix your nerves. It's a strange blend of comfort and confusion. You're not alone anymore, but navigating this new information overload is its own kind of stress. The 1980s mark a turning point in the medical understanding of anxiety. Mental health professionals, armed with new diagnostic tools like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, begin to categorize anxiety disorders with a clarity that feels both reassuring and clinical. No longer just vague catch-all terms like nerves or hysteria. Anxiety starts to take shape as defined disorders: panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, and more. This shift helps you name what you're feeling, lending legitimacy to your experiences and, for the first time, a chance for tailored treatment. But naming the beast doesn't make it tame, as you have to navigate the labyrinth of doctors' appointments, insurance forms, and treatment plans. In the shadows of the decade, a fringe belief persists that your anxiety might be due to a malfunctioning maternal instinct. You laugh quietly because if that were true, you'd be in serious trouble. Motherhood is still idolized, but the pressures and fears around it are a dark secret whispered behind closed doors. This decade is also the golden age of magazines. You flip through glossy pages filled with articles on how to be a perfect wife and mother, the dangers of overthinking, and simple ways to keep calm and carry on. The advice ranges from charmingly old-fashioned to downright bizarre, like suggestions to drink warm milk with honey every night, or wear copper bracelets to balance your nerves. You might stumble upon a new form of therapy psychoanalysis in practice, though it's still mostly reserved for the wealthy. Women like you lie on couches, speaking to doctors about dreams and desires, fears and fantasies, hoping to unravel the knots inside your mind. But don't get too hopeful. The stigma around mental health remains stubborn. Many women still hide their anxiety behind smiles, cocktail dresses, and cigarette holders. And yet, this era plants seeds for change. The very act of naming your suffering, talking about it, and seeking help, even in the limited forms available, is a quiet rebellion. As you step out into the smoky, glittering night, the sounds of a saxophone drifting through the air, you hold your chest and breathe deep. Anxiety isn't gone. It's just learning to dance to a new tune. Welcome to the post-World War II era, where the world is rebuilding, and you're caught somewhere between hope and exhaustion. The 1950s are shiny and polite, with powdered faces, matching lipstick, and a perfect smile that never cracks, 7 if your nerves feel like they're made of fragile glass. Anxiety is whispered about behind closed doors, wrapped in phrases like nervous breakdown or shell shock, though mostly reserved for men who returned from war. Women's worries? Well, those get swept under the carpet, labeled as female troubles. This decade sees the rise of a new fix-all, tranquilizers. drugs like Valium and Librium flood the market, promising calm in a pill. You pop one and feel the world slow down, a welcome lullaby after years of uncertainty. But these pills come with a catch. Dependence creeps in quietly, like a shadow you don't quite notice until it's too late. Historians still argue whether tranquilizers truly helped women find relief or simply masked the deeper causes of anxiety, silencing cries for societal change. Your doctor hands you a prescription with a smile and a pat on the back, like handing over a tiny escape pod for the daily grind. And it works, sort of. You might forget why you were anxious in the first place, but the underlying restlessness hums beneath the surface. Meanwhile, the ideal woman of the 50s is expected to be the perfect homemaker, happy, serene, and composed, while managing a house full of children and a husband with war stories to tell. You're supposed to be the emotional rock, even if inside you're unraveling like a cheap sweater. There's a strange irony in that the very drugs meant to fix anxiety also make you numb, blurring the line between peace and dullness. Some women feel caught in a fog, unsure if they're calm or simply asleep at the wheel. In popular culture, anxiety takes the form of fainting spells, nervous tics, or the nervous housewife trope in sitcoms. A woman who laughs a little too loudly or rushes to the doctor at the slightest flutter of her heart. Fringe treatments are still hanging on. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, is used, often controversially, as a last resort for severe cases. You may find yourself strapped down again, the room dimmed, jolted awake, by a shocking current memories hazy, but the fear unmistakable. The decade also births self-help books promising control over your nerves through deep breathing, relaxation techniques, and positive thinking. You try the breathing exercises in your pink floral pajamas, but the anxiety is stubborn, sneaking back in the quiet moments. On the scientific front, the first studies on anxiety disorders begin to take shape, but the road to understanding is slow. The idea that anxiety is a chemical imbalance in the brain is barely a whisper in the medical community. You listen to the radio while dusting the furniture, wondering if your nerves are real or just in your head, a phrase that stings more than any medicine. The bureaucratic language feels cold compared to the warm swirl of anxiety inside you. You wonder if the people who write those manuals have ever felt a heart pounding in a silent room, or the creeping dread before a crowded event. Therapeutically, a new star emerges, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which promises to change your relationship with anxiety. Instead of simply talking through your feelings, you learn to identify the negative thought patterns that fuel your anxiety, then challenge and reframe them. It's mental training, like pushing your brain through a workout to build resilience. At first, it feels awkward and exhausting. What if I say the wrong thing? Can I really change how I think? But with time, you notice little victories. Less racing thoughts, more calm moments, a slightly lighter step. You keep at it, partly because the alternative feels like drowning. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical scene is buzzing with innovation and controversy. The introduction of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs like Prozac, revolutionizes treatment. For the first time, there are medications designed to gently rebalance brain chemistry with fewer side effects than the earlier benzodiazepines, which often left you feeling like a zombie or a hostage in your own mind. Taking that first pill feels like stepping onto a moving train. You're hopeful, cautious, and a little uncertain where it will take you. you quickly realize that medication is not a magic bullet. Some days the pill seems to dull the anxious edge, giving you space to breathe. Other days you wonder if the calm is worth the fogginess or emotional numbness that sometimes creeps in. You sit with these conflicting feelings, trying to figure out what works for you. The media loves to sensationalize these drugs. Some day they're miracle cures, the next they're addictive poisons. It's exhausting to keep up. The 1980s and 90s also bring a slow but important shift in popular culture's portrayal of anxiety. Instead of the exaggerated fainting or hysterical woman from earlier decades, TV shows and movies start to offer more nuanced and relatable depictions. Characters struggle with panic attacks, social fears, and the pressure to keep it together. You see parts of yourself reflected on the screen, your messy mornings, your second-guessing, your late-night worries, and feel a quiet relief that you're not alone in this. Still, the decade has its quirks. The self-help movement explodes like fireworks on New Year's Eve, promising that if you just visualize success, think positively, or tap into your inner energy, you can banish anxiety forever. You might watch a seminar where the speaker wears flowing scarves and talks about chakras while waving their hands in the air. Sometimes you buy the books and tapes, hopeful for a secret formula. Other times you roll your eyes but follow the exercises anyway because when you're desperate, even a little hope feels good. This period also sees a boom in alternative and complementary therapies. Acupuncture, biofeedback, yoga, and energy healing sessions grow in popularity. You might find yourself lying on a table with tiny needles in your skin, wondering if this ancient practice will truly calm your nerves or if it's just a placebo. You try guided meditation tapes, light incense, and even a little crystal tucked in your pocket for good luck. Some days these rituals become sacred routines, moments of peace in the chaos. Historians still argue how these therapies fit into the larger history of anxiety treatment. Were they a genuine step toward holistic healing, or just fads riding the wave of anxiety's popularity? The debate reminds you how tangled the story of anxiety really is, part medicine, part culture, part commerce. At the same time, workplace pressure is mounting, especially for women. The having it all narrative balancing careers, families, and social lives creates a pressure cooker environment. You feel like you're juggling flaming torches, and anxiety is the uninvited spotlight operator, shining a harsh beam on every potential slip. The idea that you can excel at work, be a perfect partner, and maintain your sanity simultaneously feels like a cruel joke. You notice that anxiety doesn't just hit in quiet moments, but explodes during meetings, social gatherings, and even on your daily commute. You're on high alert, managing a performance you're not always sure you signed up for. And yet, the expectation remains to smile through it, to be the strong woman who doesn't crack. Despite progress in awareness, whispers of shame linger. You still hesitate to talk openly about panic attacks, sleepless nights, or moments when your chest tightens so much you feel like you might disappear. The stigma doesn't vanish overnight. It's a shadow lurking behind the breakthroughs. But the conversations are starting, slowly and surely. Online forums begin to pop up, where strangers share stories and tips, creating virtual spaces of understanding and solidarity. You might stumble onto these communities late at night, reading in the glow of your computer screen, feeling less alone. The decade's blend of science, pop culture, and alternative therapies creates a confusing but rich landscape. You sip your chamomile tea, glance at a stack of self-help books on your nightstand and think, well, at least we are trying. Anxiety hasn't disappeared. It hasn't even gotten simpler. But you're learning new ways to live with it, to push back, and sometimes to find peace. And remember, this story isn't just about medicine or psychology, it's about you, navigating your nerves in a world that's changing faster than ever before. You find yourself in the late 1990s and early 2000s, a time when the world around you is speeding up, and the way you access information is transforming right before your eyes. The internet, once a mysterious tool for academics and techies, becomes a sprawling global network connecting millions, including you. Suddenly, knowledge about anxiety and mental health isn't locked behind doctors' doors or buried in textbooks. It's at your fingertips, day and night, whenever the shadows creep in or the worries start to swirl. Picture this. It's the middle of the night, your heart pounding, breath catching, and instead of just lying there, trapped in the echo chamber of your thoughts, you reach for your computer or phone and type in panic attack symptoms. You're no longer alone. Thousands of websites, forums, and chat rooms pop up, places where strangers, just like you, share stories, advice, and empathy. You read about other people's experiences, realizing your fears aren't so unique or strange after all. This new accessibility is empowering, yet it also overwhelms. With so much conflicting advice, you sometimes feel more lost than before, caught between medical jargon and hopeful anecdotes. Medically, pharmaceuticals remain central in the fight against anxiety, but the conversation around them deepens and becomes more complex. Benzodiazepines like Xanax, Valium, and Ativan, once hailed as rapid relief saviors, come under scrutiny for their addictive potential and difficult withdrawal processes. You or someone you know might have experienced this firsthand. The relief from panic that these drugs offer can feel like a double-edged sword, providing calm but chaining you to a dependency that's hard to break. Doctors and patients alike wrestle with these trade-offs, trying to balance immediate relief with long-term health. Meanwhile, SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors introduced in the 80s, continue their dominance, but are no longer the mysterious miracle pills. You hear more about their side effects, from nausea and fatigue to emotional numbness. Taking these medications can feel like navigating a minefield. You want to manage your anxiety without losing the vibrant spark that makes you, well, you. The media loves a good drug controversy, fueling debates and fears. Headlines swing from Prozac, the wonder drug, to the dark side of antidepressants, making it hard to know who to trust. In the therapy room, treatment methods expand and evolve. Alongside the tried and true cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, you find yourself introduced to mindfulness-based therapies and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. These approaches shift the goal away from fixing anxiety or erasing it, and toward learning to live with it more gently. You practice observing your anxious thoughts as if they were clouds drifting by, sometimes dark and stormy, sometimes light and fluffy, but never permanent fixtures in your sky. The idea of befriending anxiety rather than battling it feels revolutionary, yet oddly comforting. Historians still debate how much these shifts represent true progress or simply reflect changing cultural fashions. Are we genuinely better equipped to handle anxiety, or have we repackaged old struggles with new buzzwords? It's a question that reminds you of the cyclical nature of history, Today's breakthroughs might be tomorrow's remember when. Popular culture plays a huge role in normalizing anxiety in this era. Celebrities begin to break silence around their mental health struggles in unprecedented ways. You watch interviews with stars candidly discussing panic attacks, therapy sessions, and even medication, helping chip away at stigma. Seeing people you admire admit to anxiety makes it easier for you to acknowledge your own experiences. Suddenly, anxiety isn't just a personal burden. It's part of a larger conversation about what it means to be human. Yet, the digital age is a double-edged sword. While the internet offers connection and information, it also fuels new forms of anxiety you didn't anticipate. The fear of missing out, FOMO, creeps in as you scroll through carefully curated social media feeds, watching friends and strangers alike seemingly live perfect, exciting lives. You begin to measure your own worth against a highlight reel of smiles and achievements, not the messy reality underneath. The constant notifications, emails, and messages keep your mind in a near constant state of alertness, like a buzzing fly you can't swat away. This paradox of technology is still being unpacked, with scholars arguing over whether it ultimately helps or harms mental health. In more fringe corners, alternative therapies maintain their popularity. Crystal healing, aromatherapy, Reiki energy healing, and other New Age practices flourish. You might light a lavender-scented candle during an online support group, or wear a bracelet rumored to balance your energy fields. Sometimes these rituals feel like simple comfort blankets, others like serious attempts at holistic healing. Whether placebo or potent, these practices carve out a space where science and spirituality brush against each other, reflecting the ongoing human quest for relief and meaning. The pressures on women during this period remain formidable. The cultural narrative pushes the idea of having it all, thriving in careers, managing households, nurturing relationships, and looking good while doing it. You juggle work deadlines, family schedules, social obligations, and your own internal expectations, all while trying to silence the nervous chatter inside your head. It's no wonder anxiety spikes under these demands, and yet the expectation to handle it gracefully persists. The image of the perfect, calm, successful woman endures as a myth, one you constantly struggle to live up to. This decade also introduces a more nuanced understanding of how anxiety intersects with race, class, gender identity, and sexuality. Mental health is no longer viewed through a one-size-fits-all lens. You begin to see awareness that systemic inequalities shape how anxiety manifests and how people access treatment. For example, stigma might be heavier in some communities or resources scarcer in others. This intersectional view pushes toward more personalized, culturally sensitive care, acknowledging the complexity of each person's lived experience, its progress, but also a reminder of how far there is yet to go. You might feel hopeful and tired, curious and cautious. Your journey through anxiety treatment is part of a much larger social and cultural evolution, a dance between science, technology, culture, and personal struggle. You keep searching for balance, for moments of calm in a rapidly changing world. You sip your chamomile tea once more, glancing at a bookmarked self-help website on your screen and think, maybe this time we're getting closer. You're stepping into the 2010s and early 2020s, a time when anxiety finally feels less like a shadow lurking in silence. It's more like a conversation happening in plain sight. Social media is no longer just a source of stress. It becomes a platform for community, awareness, and sometimes, surprisingly, healing. The dialogue around mental health explodes, but not without its complications. Scrolling through your feed, you notice influencers, celebrities, and everyday people sharing their experiences with anxiety, some raw and unfiltered, others polished and branded. This visibility is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you feel seen, less alone, and empowered to speak your own truth. On the other, you wonder if anxiety is becoming the latest trend, with hashtags, merch, and viral memes sometimes trivializing real suffering. Historians still debate whether this democratization of mental health awareness is an unalloyed good or a complex social phenomenon with unexpected downsides. Pharmaceuticals remain a staple in many people's anxiety toolkit, but you also observe a growing wariness. The public conversation is shifting, no longer just about take this pill and feel better, but about patient rights, shared decision-making, and holistic care. You might have noticed online debates over antidepressant withdrawal symptoms, or stories about people who found freedom by tapering off medications with professional guidance. There's also more scrutiny on the role of pharmaceutical companies, their influence on prescribing habits, and the broader question of medicalization. Therapies continue to diversify in this era, and you're spoiled for choice. Cognitive behavioral therapy is still widely practiced, but mindfulness meditation has become mainstream, and even apps promise to teach you to breathe your way out of panic. You might have tried a guided meditation on your phone or signed up for a Zoom therapy session technology here, playing both savior and source of anxiety. Teletherapy breaks down barriers for many, but not everyone has access or comfort with the digital medium, reminding you that progress is never uniform. Interestingly, you see the rise of peer-led and community-based mental health support. Online forums, support groups, and social media spaces offer places to vent, connect, and share coping strategies. You might find yourself in a Facebook group dedicated to anxiety, where memes and heartfelt stories coexist, or in a Reddit thread trading tips about managing symptoms during stressful times. This peer-to-peer approach challenges the traditional medical model and empowers people to be active participants in their own healing journeys. Culturally, the stigma around anxiety continues to erode, but new challenges emerge. You might catch yourself wondering, am I allowed to feel this way, or am I just oversharing? Anxiety becomes a sort of social currency, acknowledged, yes, but sometimes weaponized in conversations about productivity, privilege, and resilience. The wellness culture boom offers yoga classes, essential oils, and self-care routines, but can also pressure you to perform relaxation or guilt trip you if you're still struggling. Scholars discuss how wellness can both liberate and commodify anxiety treatment. Social media itself, while a tool for connection, remains a paradoxical beast. The constant scroll of news, opinions, and comparisons can feed the very anxiety you hope to soothe. You might find yourself falling down rabbit holes of doom scrolling or feeling the pang of social media fatigue. Researchers investigate the impact of these digital habits on mental health, though consensus remains elusive. You're left to navigate this tricky terrain on your own terms, often with trial and error. In this period, intersectionality grows more prominent. You hear more voices from marginalized communities speaking out about the unique ways anxiety intersects with race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. Mental health advocacy becomes more inclusive, addressing disparities in access to care and culturally competent treatment. This evolving awareness deepens your understanding that anxiety isn't a one-size-fits-all experience, but deeply tied to identity and environment. Meanwhile, alternative and complementary therapies flourish alongside mainstream treatments. You might explore acupuncture, herbal supplements, or sound therapy, blending ancient practices with modern sensibilities. Some swear by CBD oils, while others prefer breathwork or somatic experiencing. You understand that healing is personal and often eclectic, with room for science and spirit to coexist. The workplace, long a source of anxiety, begins to change, at least on paper. Mental health days, flexible schedules, and employee assistance programs pop up as employers recognize the cost of untreated anxiety. Yet you also notice the persistence of toxic work cultures and the always-on expectations exacerbated by smartphones and remote work, especially during the pandemic. The conversation about anxiety at work is evolving but far from resolved. You reflect on how the COVID-19 pandemic from 2020 onwards dramatically shifted the anxiety landscape. Isolation, uncertainty, and health fears intensified anxiety worldwide, while simultaneously normalizing mental health struggles as nearly everyone felt some strain. Teletherapy surged, digital support networks blossomed, and society's collective mental health was spotlighted like never before. Historians in the future may debate whether this period marked a turning point or just a bump in the road. Amid all this, your personal journey through anxiety treatment is anything but linear. There are days when you find peace in a meditation app, other days when the noise of social media feels suffocating. You try medications, therapy, and alternative methods, weaving together what feels right. You learn to be gentle with yourself, recognizing that anxiety is not a failing but part of your human experience. Sometimes you laugh at the irony. Centuries ago, women's anxiety was blamed on their wandering wombs or evil spirits. Now it's a complex interplay of biology, environment, and culture, with an entire internet devoted to it. And yet, despite all the progress, you realize some things remain constant, like the desire to be understood, to be seen, and to find moments of calm in a noisy world. You probably won't survive this without a few eye rolls at the wellness trends and some exasperated sighs at your own anxious brain. But that's okay. This chapter in history is messy and bright, full of contradictions and hope. So, take a deep breath, maybe stretch your fingers, and let this moment of calm wash over you as you keep navigating your way through anxiety in the digital age. You wake up to the hum of a new era when anxiety treatment is no longer confined to clinics or whispering behind closed doors, but has become a vast ecosystem filled with innovation, controversy, and cultural shifts. It's the mid-2020s now, and your experience with anxiety is intertwined with groundbreaking technology, ongoing debates about mental health equity, and an ever-expanding toolkit of treatments, both ancient and futuristic. Welcome to the age where the future of anxiety treatment is being shaped right under your fingertips. Let's start with technology, your constant companion and occasional tormentor. The rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning has revolutionized how anxiety is understood, diagnosed, and managed. Imagine apps and platforms powered by algorithms that can analyze your speech patterns, facial expressions, and even physiological signals like heart rate variability through wearable devices. These systems attempt to detect early signs of anxiety episodes before you even realize you're entering a panic spiral. You might be wearing a smartwatch that buzzes gently, reminding you to breathe or suggesting a guided meditation tailored to your current emotional state. This is no longer science fiction. The early 2020s saw a surge in digital therapeutics software programs, validated by clinical trials that deliver cognitive behavioral therapy modules, mindfulness exercises, and stress management coaching directly through your phone or computer. Some promise anonymity and accessibility that traditional therapy cannot always guarantee. You can do a session at 2 a.m. if you're wide awake with worry, without leaving your bed or feeling judged. Historians still debate whether these AI-driven tools will fundamentally change the course of mental health care, or if they risk reducing human complexity to a series of data points. Can a machine truly grasp the nuances of your lived experience, the tangled web of memories, traumas, and hopes that fuel your anxiety? Or do these tools complement human therapists by providing more frequent support and monitoring? Meanwhile, teletherapy, once a pandemic-born necessity, has cemented its place as a mainstay. The old barriers of geography, mobility, and scheduling are less daunting. You can choose from thousands of therapists worldwide, sometimes even receiving therapy through text or chat, a lifeline for those who find verbal communication overwhelming. But this ease brings new challenges: building rapport through a screen, privacy concerns, and Zoom fatigue add layers to your treatment journey. At the same time, you see a robust push for integrating mental health care into primary care and community settings, especially to address the glaring inequities that have plagued the system for centuries. You read about programs where nurses, social workers, and even trained peers provide mental health support in schools, workplaces, and neighborhood centers. This task-shifting approach aims to reach underserved populations, reduce stigma, and make anxiety treatment less elitist. Yet, despite these advances, systemic challenges persist. The cost of mental health care remains a barrier for many, with insurance coverage patchy and inconsistent worldwide. You might have experienced long wait lists, lack of culturally competent providers, or language barriers that make accessing care frustrating. These realities underscore that technological and therapeutic progress cannot fully heal societal inequities on their own. In research labs and biotech startups, the boundaries between neurology and psychiatry blur. You hear about precision psychiatry, an ambitious effort to use genetic, neuroimaging, and biochemical data to predict who will respond best to specific treatments. The goal is to move away from trial and error prescribing, tailoring medication and therapy to your unique biology. Imagine a future where a blood test or brain scan helps select your perfect treatment cocktail, reducing months or years of suffering. But this promise raises ethical questions. Who owns your genetic data? How will privacy be protected? Could this lead to new forms of discrimination or insurance denial? Scholars are still hashing out the implications, reminding you that every medical breakthrough carries potential pitfalls. In parallel, the field of psychedelics is experiencing a renaissance, shaking the foundations of anxiety treatment. After decades of stigma and prohibition, substances like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, MDMA, ecstasy, and ketamine are being rigorously studied for their therapeutic potential. Clinical trials suggest that under careful, guided conditions, these substances can reset entrenched anxiety patterns, helping patients access emotional breakthroughs that traditional therapies often cannot reach. You might find yourself fascinated by documentaries or personal accounts describing psychedelic-assisted therapy sessions, where people confront their deepest fears and emerge with renewed hope. These treatments are not magic pills. They require professional supervision, preparation, and integration. But the results are promising enough to ignite hope for a new era of healing. However, historians caution against viewing psychedelics as a panacea. The cultural context, legal frameworks, and ethical guidelines around their use remain in flux. There's a risk of repeating past mistakes of commercialization or ignoring indigenous knowledge that has preserved these substances' sacred traditions for centuries. Meanwhile, mindfulness and meditation continue their steady march from niche practice to mainstream medicine. You might attend corporate wellness workshops, yoga studios, or apps promising mindfulness for anxiety, but this widespread adoption also invites critique. Some scholars argue that mindfulness has been commodified, stripped of its spiritual roots, and packaged as a productivity tool for stressed-out workers, rather than a path to genuine peace. At the same time, there's growing awareness of toxic positivity. The pressure to always stay positive and just breathe can sometimes invalidate real pain and struggle. You find that the best healing spaces allow you to feel the full spectrum of your emotions, including fear, sadness, and anger, without judgment. On the cultural front, the conversation about anxiety is more inclusive and intersectional than ever. You hear voices from marginalized communities advocating for recognition of how systemic racism, homophobia, sexism, and economic hardship uniquely shape anxiety experiences. You read stories about anxiety shaped by microaggressions, immigration trauma, or the pressure of navigating multiple identities. This richer understanding challenges simplistic narratives and pushes for justice in mental health care access and treatment. You might attend community events or online panels where activists discuss decolonizing mental health efforts to incorporate traditional healing practices, respect cultural values, and dismantle Eurocentric biases in psychiatry. These movements highlight that anxiety treatment isn't just about individual brains, but about social structures and histories. Simultaneously, alternative and complementary therapies thrive in this diverse landscape. You might try sound baths, forest bathing, or traditional plant medicines, blending cutting-edge science with ancestral wisdom. Some people find comfort in herbal supplements, acupuncture, or breathwork, while others embrace holistic models that treat mind, body, and spirit as inseparable. The workplace and education systems continue to grapple with mental health challenges. Employers implement mental health days, flexible hours, and employee assistance programs, but the pace of modern life and technology-fueled burnout remain formidable adversaries. Remote work blurs boundaries between personal and professional life, creating new anxieties even as it offers flexibility. Schools increasingly prioritize social-emotional learning and mental health resources, recognizing the impact of anxiety on academic performance and well-being. Yet, you also notice the tension between encouraging resilience and avoiding over-pathologizing normal stress. Finding that balance is an ongoing challenge. You might reflect on the role of family and social networks in this era. Despite technological advances, the human need for connection and understanding remains vital. Friends, partners, and communities play crucial roles in supporting or sometimes complicating anxiety management. The pandemic's lessons about isolation and loneliness linger, reminding you that healing is rarely a solo journey. Throughout this time, the language around anxiety shifts. Terms like neurodiversity and mental wellness enter mainstream discourse, reflecting more compassionate and empowering views. You hear more about trauma-informed care, emphasizing safety, trust, and collaboration, rather than just symptom control. But you also notice the challenges of navigating this new lexicon. Medical jargon, pop psychology buzzwords, and social media slang create a sometimes confusing landscape. Finding credible information and trusted providers requires patience and discernment. You, as someone living through this chapter, experience all these waves of change with a mixture of hope, skepticism, and perseverance. The treatment of anxiety is no longer a secret whispered behind closed doors. It's a sprawling, sometimes messy, sometimes miraculous tapestry woven from technology, culture, science, and human connection. And as you lie back, contemplating the journey so far, you realize this era might be the most complex, yet filled with dazzling innovations, but also new questions and challenges that only time will answer. You sink deeper into the present moment, where the treatment of women's anxiety continues to evolve in complex, fascinating, and sometimes contradictory ways. It's a world where progress often runs alongside persistent challenges, where ancient wisdom is rediscovered but also reinterpreted, and where your lived experiences, a woman, or simply a human wrestling with anxiety, is shaped by social change, scientific breakthroughs, and cultural currents all swirling together. Let's begin with something that sounds almost too good to be true: the rise of trauma-informed care. This isn't just a buzzword or a trendy phrase. It's a fundamental shift in how anxiety, especially in women, is approached. Historically, women's anxiety was often dismissed or attributed to hysteria or emotional weakness. But trauma-informed care recognizes that anxiety symptoms may be the echoes of past traumas, many of which women disproportionately experience, whether from domestic violence, sexual abuse, systemic discrimination, or the often invisible burdens of caregiving. You notice that therapists, healthcare providers, and even workplaces are adopting trauma-informed approaches, which prioritize safety, trust, empowerment, and choice. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" they ask, "What happened to you?" It's a question loaded with compassion and curiosity, and it changes everything. This approach acknowledges that anxiety isn't just a personal failing. It's often a survival mechanism, a way your nervous system has adapted to protect you from harm. Historians still argue whether trauma-informed care will reshape mental health care broadly or remain confined to progressive pockets. But its impact on women's anxiety treatment is undeniable. You find yourself wondering if this model could finally undo centuries of misunderstanding and mistreatment. But trauma-informed care is just one piece of a vast puzzle. You encounter the growing recognition of intersectionality, how women's anxiety can't be understood without considering race, class, sexuality, disability, and other identities. For example, a black woman navigating anxiety might face not only the biological and psychological effects of her condition, but also the stress of racial discrimination, microaggressions, and unequal access to care. Similarly, LGBTQ+ women might experience anxiety tied to societal rejection or identity concealment. This richer, more nuanced understanding of anxiety challenges mental health providers to offer culturally competent and personalized care. It also reveals the systemic barriers many women face. You might attend panels or read articles where advocates stress that without addressing social determinants like poverty, housing insecurity, or access to education, treatment remains incomplete. Anxiety is both a symptom and a signal of broader social inequalities. While the cultural conversation expands, science marches forward too. Advances in neurobiology and psychopharmacology offer new insights into the female brain and its unique responses to stress and anxiety. You learn that hormonal fluctuations from menstrual cycles to pregnancy to menopause play a significant role in anxiety's intensity and presentation. This has been overlooked for decades, partly because most research historically focused on male subjects. The scientific community is now trying to catch up, studying how estrogen, progesterone, and other hormones interact with neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA, shaping anxiety symptoms and treatment responses. You might be surprised to discover that some medications work differently in women due to these biological nuances. Dosages, side effects, and efficacy all vary, but many women have had to navigate this uncertainty on their own. The push for sex-specific research and treatment protocols aims to change that. Yet even as science progresses, some women seek alternatives beyond pharmaceuticals. You come across the resurgence of herbal medicine and botanical remedies tailored specifically to women's mental health. For centuries, plants like chamomile, lavender, passion flower, and valerian root have been used to soothe anxiety. Modern research validates some of these traditional remedies, though the exact mechanisms often remain a bit mysterious. You might chuckle at the irony that while modern medicine races toward high-tech solutions, some of the oldest treatments still hold value. Historians note that these remedies were often sidelined during the rise of pharmaceutical dominance, sometimes dismissed as folk medicine or placebo. Now there's a blending of ancient and modern, where holistic approaches meet clinical science. The debate continues. Are herbal remedies effective enough to be considered primary treatments, or should they remain complementary? You also notice the growing popularity of mind-body practices like yoga, tai chi, and qigong. These disciplines emphasize breath control, movement, and meditation, helping women connect with their bodies in a way that can reduce anxiety. Unlike earlier eras where women's physical activity was restricted or frowned upon, today these practices empower women to harness their own physiological rhythms for healing. But not everything in this new era is rosy. You see how social media, despite its benefits for connection and mental health advocacy, can paradoxically exacerbate anxiety. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok showcase idealized versions of life and wellness, creating pressure to perform happiness and calmness. The rise of influencer therapy sometimes blurs lines between genuine care and marketing. You might find yourself rolling your eyes at the latest self-care trend that promises instant anxiety relief with a fancy crystal or a pricey diffuser. Still, social media also offers solidarity, especially for marginalized women who find communities that understand their struggles. Online support groups, mental health advocates, and awareness campaigns have destigmatized anxiety like never before. You might feel inspired by stories of women breaking silence, sharing their journeys, and demanding better care. At the same time, legal and policy frameworks are catching up, albeit slowly. Laws mandating mental health coverage, workplace accommodations, and protections against discrimination are gaining traction worldwide. You might work in an environment that offers anxiety-specific accommodations, like flexible scheduling, quiet spaces, or remote work options. These measures acknowledge that anxiety isn't just in your head, and that structural support is crucial. Yet, enforcement and awareness of these policies vary. Many women still face stigma and misunderstanding at work or in medical settings. The cultural shift toward openness is ongoing, fragile, and sometimes uneven. You might find yourself reflecting on the role of family in anxiety treatment. Unlike centuries ago when women's mental health was largely a private matter, families today often play active roles, both positive and challenging. Family therapy, psychoeducation, and support groups include loved ones in treatment plans, recognizing that anxiety affects relationships and vice versa. However, families can also be sources of anxiety, especially when dealing with generational trauma or cultural taboos. You might recall stories of women whose anxiety was dismissed as nerves or bad behavior by relatives echoing painful historical patterns. The challenge now is breaking those cycles with empathy and education. Education itself has become a key battlefield in anxiety treatment. Schools and universities implement programs aimed at emotional literacy, stress management, and resilience building. You might remember how, in the past, mental health was barely acknowledged in classrooms. Today, curricula often include mindfulness, exercises, peer counseling, and resources for anxiety management. Still, the pressure to perform academically and socially can sometimes overwhelm these supports. Students, especially girls and young women, navigate a complex landscape of expectations that can fuel anxiety. Educators grapple with balancing support and rigor, trying to create safe spaces without lowering standards. Technology is again a double-edged sword. While apps, virtual reality, and biofeedback devices offer innovative anxiety treatments, they also raise concerns about data privacy, accessibility, and over-reliance on gadgets. You might hesitate before trusting an app with your mental health data, or wonder if virtual reality exposure therapy is as effective as in-person sessions. The future of anxiety treatment for women also involves ethical questions around emerging technologies like genetic editing and brain stimulation. CRISPR and other gene editing tools hold promise for understanding and possibly altering genetic risk factors linked to anxiety disorders. Deep brain stimulation and transcranial magnetic stimulation are being explored as treatments for severe treatment-resistant anxiety. You might find these developments exciting, but also a little unsettling. Who decides when it's appropriate to rewire the brain or edit genes? How do we balance hope for cure with respect for individual autonomy and the complexity of mental health? Public health initiatives increasingly recognize the importance of prevention, aiming to reduce anxiety at a population level. Campaigns focus on reducing childhood trauma, promoting healthy lifestyles, and addressing social determinants like housing, nutrition, and community safety. You see how treating anxiety isn't just about therapy or meds, it's about creating environments where women can thrive without chronic stress. Yet funding and political will fluctuate. Prevention often takes a back seat to crisis management. You wonder if society will ever invest enough in the upstream causes of anxiety rather than downstream treatments. Peer support and lived experience shape treatment approaches more than ever. Women with anxiety are no longer just recipients of care, they're leaders, advocates, and researchers. You hear about peer-led groups, participatory research, and patient-centered care models that honor women's voices and wisdom. This participatory approach contrasts sharply with older eras when women's experiences were minimized or pathologized. Now, women's insights inform clinical guidelines, policy, and education, fostering treatments that are more respectful, effective, and empowering. As you take it all in, you realize that anxiety treatment for women in this era is less about a one-size-fits-all solution and more about embracing complexity. It's about honoring history without being trapped by it, blending science with compassion, and weaving together individual healing with social justice. And here you are living in the thick of this transformation, navigating your own path with all the resources, challenges, and contradictions that come with it. The journey is ongoing, the story still unfolding, and you remain a vital part of the narrative. You find yourself at the cusp of history's vast ocean, waves of centuries washing over you as you contemplate the treatment of women's anxiety, this persistent, elusive companion that has followed women through time like a shadow that refuses to fade. It's been a journey marked by misunderstanding, progress, setbacks, and brave, often quiet resistance. And now, here you are, navigating the complexities of modern life with the echoes of that history whispering behind you. By this point, you've seen how anxiety for women was once branded hysteria and how remedies ranged from crocodile dung to electric shocks. You've walked through centuries where faith and superstition intertwined with emerging science, where the female body was simultaneously revered and feared, where mental health was both a private shame and a public spectacle. You've felt the pulse of feminist movements demanding recognition, heard the hum of trauma-informed care, and glimpsed the shimmering possibilities of neuroscience and technology. Now let's slow down. Let's settle into the quieter, more reflective moments where anxiety is not a diagnosis or a problem to be fixed, but a lived experience, sometimes terrifying, sometimes quietly persistent, sometimes oddly familiar. Tonight, you allow yourself to breathe deeply, to feel the weight of history on your shoulders, but also the resilience that has carried women forward. The first thing you notice is how deeply intertwined anxiety is with identity. It's not just a clinical term or a list of symptoms. It's woven into who women have been, are, and will be. For many women, anxiety has been a silent companion, a force shaping choices about family, career, relationships, and self-worth. It's a response to real threats, both physical and social, and an echo of past traumas and present pressures. Historians still argue whether anxiety should be viewed primarily as a disorder or as an adaptive response to the complexities of life. This debate reminds you that mental health is not simply about pathology, but about understanding the full context of human experience. It nudges you to consider how much of what has been labeled disorder is actually survival, creativity, and resilience under pressure. As you sit with this thought, you remember how women in different eras resisted and redefined anxiety treatment. In the 19th century, for example, women who were once patients in madhouses founded early advocacy groups, challenging the brutal conditions and demanding humane care. Their stories are both heartbreaking and inspiring, reminding you that women have always been active agents, not just passive sufferers. You also think about the global landscape. Anxiety treatment for women isn't a single, uniform story. Around the world, cultural beliefs, economic conditions, and healthcare infrastructures shape how anxiety is understood and treated. In some places, herbal medicine and traditional healers remain primary sources of care. In others, Western psychiatric models dominate. The tension between these approaches reflects broader questions about power, colonialism, and cultural respect. You might recall how indigenous women, for example, blend community rituals, storytelling, and connection to land as part of their healing. Western psychiatry often dismisses these as unscientific, yet these practices have profound meaning and efficacy within their context. The challenge is creating dialogue and mutual respect, rather than imposing one-size-fits-all solutions. Technology's role in anxiety treatment also leaves you with mixed feelings. Teletherapy and apps have expanded access for many women, especially those in rural or underserved areas. But you worry about digital divides, privacy concerns, and whether virtual connections can fully replace human presence. The balance between innovation and authenticity is a delicate dance. You ponder the role of language and stigma. Even today, despite advances, many women hesitate to seek help because of cultural taboos or fears of being labeled weak or crazy. The words we use matter deeply. They can heal or harm, include or exclude. Campaigns that promote open conversations and destigmatization have made strides, but work remains. It's in these moments that you appreciate the rise of peer support and lived experience leadership. Women who share their stories publicly break down walls of isolation. They create communities where anxiety is seen not as shameful, but as part of a shared human condition. These grassroots movements shift the culture from fear and silence to acceptance and empowerment. You also notice the changing landscape of medicine. Personalized psychiatry, which tailors treatments based on genetics, environment, and personal history, offers hope for more effective care. Yet you recognize ethical questions. Who decides what normal means? How do we protect women from medicalization of natural emotional states? Historians still debate the fine line between healing and control. Meanwhile, the rise of holistic health reminds you that anxiety treatment isn't just about the brain, it's about the whole person. Nutrition, sleep, exercise, relationships, spirituality all influence anxiety. Ancient practices like acupuncture, aromatherapy, and massage complement modern therapies, weaving together old and new knowledge. As you reflect, you realize that anxiety treatment for women is inseparable from broader social justice. Issues like economic inequality, violence against women, reproductive rights, and access to education directly affect mental health. Advocates argue that without addressing these root causes, treatment is merely a bandage on a deeper wound. You might feel a gentle surge of hope as you witness increasing recognition that mental health is a human right. Policies worldwide begin to reflect this, with mental health integrated into public health strategies. Funding, training, and community engagement grow, aiming for not just treatment but prevention and wellness. But progress is uneven. In many parts of the world, stigma, lack of resources, and political instability limit access to care. You remind yourself that while stories of progress are uplifting, many women remain invisible and unheard. You think of the future, a horizon both bright and uncertain. Advances in AI and machine learning promise new tools for diagnosis and treatment, but also raise concerns about dehumanization and data security. Gene editing and neurotechnology could transform anxiety care, but demand careful ethical oversight. You wonder how future historians will look back on this era. Will they see it as a turning point when women's anxiety was finally understood with empathy and science? Or will they critique the failures to fully address systemic inequities and the commercialization of mental health? Ultimately, you recognize that anxiety treatment is a story without a neat ending. It's an ongoing conversation between past and present, science and culture, individual and society. It invites you to be both a witness and a participant, to learn from history, embrace complexity, and keep pushing for understanding and compassion. So, as you close your eyes tonight, remember the women who came before you, some silenced, some shouting, all striving for a life beyond fear. Feel the thread of resilience that runs through time, connecting you to them and to the women yet to come. Let your breath be steady. Let your heart be soft. Let the whispers of history lull you toward rest, knowing that in this vast unfolding story, you are never alone. Now, as the night deepens and your surroundings grow quieter, let the weight of history slowly ease off your shoulders. Imagine yourself in a soft, dimly lit room, the air carrying the faint scent of lavender or chamomile, calming your senses as you drift further from the day's worries. The stories of centuries of women struggling, resisting, healing gently fade into a whisper, a gentle hum, like a distant lullaby. Feel how, despite all the turmoil and misunderstanding, the human spirit's resilience threads through every age, connecting you to countless souls who faced their fears, who sought comfort in strange remedies or bold new ideas, who refused to be defined by their anxiety alone. Their courage and hope are now yours, quietly resting beside you. Take a deep breath, in and out, slowly. Let your body soften and your mind settle. No need to fix or analyze anything now. Just be. As you float softly between wakefulness and dreams, know that healing is a journey sometimes slow, sometimes surprising, and that you are part of an ongoing story of compassion and growth. Soon sleep will carry you away, wrapping you in calm, renewing your strength. Tomorrow is another day, and you will wake with the quiet knowledge that history's lessons, though heavy, also shine with light. So rest easy,